Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join Charlotte Canion on today's show.
I'm your host, Charlotte Canion, award-winning author, speaker, and actress. And it is my pleasure to be speaking with our guest today, Sue Phillips, who has a special passion that she will share with us. Sue, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Sue, before we get into your book, I'd like you to tell a little bit about your family and your background, because people always love to know the background of people.
Yes, well, I get my creativity from my mother, whose name was Grace Phillips, and she was an artist and a musician and a singer and an incredible home decorator and truly a Renaissance woman. And she was so creative with her artwork and her calligraphy. And so that's where the creative aspect comes from. My father was a really wonderful businessman. And in fact, at the age of 13, he became this incredible businessman and actually helped put his brothers and his family through medical school and so on. So I guess I have both sides of the coin, the business and the creative. I have an older brother who lives in San Diego, who's a businessman and also creative. And I have a lovely daughter who now lives in Europe. She was a Peace Corps volunteer, and then she went to Bucharest on a Fulbright scholar, and she is now living in Europe doing anti-human trafficking, leadership training, and experiential learning. So she's a very interesting young lady, and I'm very proud of her.
Oh, I bet you are. Now let's dive a little bit into your writing this book. And the book is called The Power of Perfume.
Yes.
That intrigued me because I know a lot of your story, but also, there's a lot of this aromatherapy around and fragrances. And we know that probably Cleopatra had her fragrances back then. And we know that the English, always carried a fragrance on their hankies and all. So I know that you have a background, in fragrances. Can you give us a little bit of that?
Yes, well, I got into fragrances quite by chance, Charlotte. I came from South Africa, wanted to be a singer and an actress because at 10 years old, I was in my first play. So I got the acting bug and always wanted to go to London and study singing and acting at RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. But I was diverted along the way, and I came to New York to see my brother who was living here, and I fell in love with New York. So I thought I would come to New York and try my luck in the acting world, but the immigration attorney said, we have 20,000 out-of-work singers and actresses, we don't need another one. What else can you do? And so I said that my mother had always said, if you're going to be an actress, have something really good to fall back on. So I had told him I'd done some executive secretarial work, and he said, aha, that's how we can get you in. And ultimately, I landed up, because I could stand up in front of people and speak, I landed up at Elizabeth Arden as the National Training Director. And that was a way for me to utilize my performance skills as well as my legitimate business skills. And that's really how I started in the fragrance industry at Elizabeth Arden as the National Training Director.
Oh, that is a great story. Okay, when did you get the idea to write the book about the power of fragrances? Because I think you use the phrase, you tell us how to choose it, how to wear it, and how to enjoy it.
Exactly. Well, it also goes back to all my years in training and in marketing and product development, because from Elizabeth Arden, I went to Lancome as marketing director, and then from there to Tiffany as vice president of marketing. And I developed and launched the Tiffany perfume. And then I had my daughter, and I started my own consulting company, which I call Centerprises, and then created fragrances for Burberry, Trish McEvoy, Avon, and Lancaster. So all those experiences and all those brands really helped me to understand the power of perfume, how a certain fragrance might appeal to a very sophisticated lady, or another fragrance might appeal to a younger woman, or a young guy. And so one perfume doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be for everybody. So I'd always wanted to write a book because I've written many, many articles about perfume. But COVID happened and I was doing many, many events and it was going really well. And then suddenly everything came to a screeching halt, no more events. And I said, you know what, this is a really good time to write my book. And that's what I did. I wrote my book and I utilized all the experiences that I had, all the brands that I'd worked on, and all the people that I've spoken to over the years who talk about fragrance in a way that becomes like their second arm. You know, people who love fragrances and who want to wear it, and then maybe it's discontinued or they can't find it any longer. People are bereft when their signature scent is no longer available to be found. And so I know all those stories, and I just felt it would be the right time to talk about fragrance in a wonderful, fun way, but educational, but also entertaining.
And that's your background. You know, you talk about fragrances. One of my favorites is Shalimar, and it's very hard to find. You know, it's a vanilla base, and it, you know, and everyone loves the fragrance, but it's very, very hard to find. And we find ones that we like, and like you say, and most people can't. I guess the word of, most people can't pick out the intonation in it. You know, each of the little, you know, which I can't. But how do you learn that while you were at, you know, Estee Lauder and
Well, actually, I wasn't at Lauder. I was at Arden and Tiffany and Lancome. But, you know, there are certain notes and certain fragrance families that appeal to people. And I'll give you the analogy. You know, in art, you have your three primary colors, the yellow, the blue, and the red. And those three primary colors literally can become secondary colors and tertiary colors. And the amount of combinations can yield hundreds of thousands of colors. So the same thing is true in music. You have your 8 notes in your octave, and those 8 notes can be, you know, can yield jazz, classics, folk, and beautiful, beautiful music. So in fragrance, there are 8 fragrance families. Your citrus, your florals, woodsy, spicy, chypre, herbaceous, and animalic. And those fragrance families can be intertwined and combined and really, melded with something else that becomes something really beautiful. And so people find the fragrance family that they like. And in fact, I do a presentation called Fragrance Through the Decades, the social, political, economic trends that influence fragrance. And it's really interesting. You talk about Shalimar. Well, Shalimar was a beautiful fragrance that came out in the early 1900s. And it was an ode to the Shah and the Emperor of India who wanted to honor his beautiful bride. So that became very, very popular. And then later on, there were twists of Shalimar. Ballard Versailles was one. A men's fragrance, Lagerfeld for Man, was a twist on Shalimar with that lovely oriental amber spicy note. So yes, there are certain fragrances that really define the decade and define, our memories.
That is amazing. I appreciate you letting me understand where my Shalimar came from. We're going to be going to a break here in a minute. Can you tell us, at the beginning of your writing your book, what, and I know your mother had a big influence on you, and she obviously, has passed by now. I think I remember that. And she had Alzheimer's. When you talk about your fragrances in your book, do you talk about your mother and some of her favorites?
As I started out by saying, she was such an amazing woman. She had such an amazing array of talent: a pianist, a singer, a painter, an artist, a home decorator. And she loved perfume. In fact, my earliest memory of perfume was when she went out at night with my dad. And she had sprayed her perfume, a beautiful floral fragrance that when she came to kiss me goodnight, her fragrance lingered in the air. And it was just so beautiful. And I remember never feeling alone or abandoned because mom had gone out and my brother was there, so I felt safe. But sometimes you're a little girl and moms go out and you feel, oh, but her perfume was in the air and it gave me such a source of comfort. And so when I think about my mom, I think about the fragrance she wore. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember the diffusion. I remember the sort of category. It was a beautiful floral fragrance with a little bit of woodsy notes. And I remember it, and I would love to recapture that sometime.
No. Sue, we're going to take a break and let our sponsors do their thing. We'll be right back with Sue Phillips.
Marianne Fairmouth is a career consultant with 30 years experience in the national recruiting world, a multi-award-winning author in multi-genres, and a speaker that gives presentations to help you succeed. Her book, Revolutionary Recruiting, made the top 20 global list of recruiting books. Find her on Amazon, your favorite bookstore, or at fairmouth.com.
Hello, I am the author Denise Bryson. My first book is The Things That Cross My Mind, Inspirational Poetry with Life Lessons. And then my audio book is Love's Reality. And it is also inspirational poetry with a jazzy flair. And then my new book is The Sex, the Lies, and the Soul Ties. They're really short stories written from a poetic expression. And then I have my first children book series, the Blinky series, which the first book is called Meet the Coins, and it is both in English and Spanish. And then the new book, From Coins to Bills. I am the author, Denise Bryson.
To embrace your children's imagination, check out Diane Floyd Bame's books for kids. There's The Moonling Adventures, all about the animals in the Serengeti. And then there's Harry the Camel, learning to love yourself just the way you are. Then The Little Girl in the Moon. There's one about friendship, another one about the big ideas, which is an inspirational story, and then Tour Tycho Town, right there in Tycho Crater on the moon. All of Diane Floyd Bame's books are available at B4R Store.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join V. Alan Bourgeois on today's show.
Okay, we're back and we're speaking with Sue Phillips, and she has a fascinating story that led with, her mother kissing her goodnight, and she remembers the fragrance of her mother. I think we all, think about, our dads wore cologne or aftershave, and my dad was an Old Spice. He was a Marine. So, I remember that, but we remember those fragrances. I think our senses are heightened by, and people can be recognized by their fragrance or their lack of, maybe as well. Let me ask you this. Do people wear fragrances as much as they used to?
I think that's a great question. I think people are wearing fragrance more and more, but fragrances that are not as easily identified and not as easily distributed by these big brands. And I think the reason for that was because of COVID. When COVID happened, people weren't going out, they were, covering up, and so they were staying at home. So they wanted to find an alternative way to really feel good. So candles became a big thing. Also, I think because people weren't going into the stores because everything was locked down, people found another way of finding fragrances online. And so many new niche brands were born because, they weren't in the big stores. And I think people are finding their own signature scent these days because they want to explore something that might not be particularly for a man or for a woman, or maybe it might be, but they're trying to cross over. I think it's so interesting how many new indie brands have been brought to the marketplace through the internet. Yeah. And it's interesting, there's not as many of the typical big fragrances that you used to smell all the time. They're much more independent these days and niche.
Yeah, I don't see the commercials, that there's advertising. Okay, now I want to ask how you put your book together. What do you touch on in your book? What can people expect when they, buy your book?
I'm really excited to say that the response that I've had has been amazing. Industry people who've read the book said to me, Sue, I learned so much. And I've been in the industry for 20, 30 years. So that was music to my ears. The head of the Fragrance Foundation, Linda Levy, read the book, and she said, she learned so much. So I think what it is a compilation of really interesting facts and unknown facts that are just interesting. For instance, how to wear fragrance. Where do you wear fragrance? Do you wear it on your wrists? Do you wear it on the clothes? Do you spray it in the air? And I go into that. I talk about fragrance through the decades, why certain fragrances became so popular in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s. And, when you think of Giorgio, Beverly Hills, for instance, you think of big, big floral fragrances. Well, that was what happened in the 80s. In the 90s, because the economy was sort of retrenching, everything came a little muted. So certain, aspects of fragrance, why certain fragrances were popular. Also, the difference between men's fragrances and women's fragrances. Are there a difference? Are there differences? I always like to say that, ingredients are ingredients. There's no gender. So why do we talk about men's fragrances and women's fragrances? It's really just the marketing. And then we talk about how different celebrities, I have met with different celebrities who've actually created their own custom scent. I also talk about the difference between perfume, eau de parfum, eau de toilette, and eau de cologne, and the different strengths and the different concentrations. So I think it's a book filled with fun facts, interesting stories, the history of perfume, how passionate I am about perfume. And I'm thrilled to say that people have said, Sue, you can just pick up the book anywhere. You don't have to read chapter by chapter, but every chapter is basically, concise in its work, and they enjoy it.
So you actually have encapsulated, where our fragrances came from, why they were developed, and I think that's fascinating. And like you said earlier, probably, I'm going to guess, back in, say, the 50s or earlier, there was a distinct difference between the male gender and the female gender, and they had, I'm going to say, stronger overtones, for a lack of, another word. But now things seem to be more muted fragrances. I was in a store I was at a meeting, I guess it was, and someone said, what is it you're wearing? I remember that, because yes. I find my Shalimar, yes. It's harder to find, but people recognize that. I know when someone has on Jungle Gardenia, oh my gosh, that was in the 60s. I remember that one, very, very strong. But you don't see the big, like Halston. They were big in both men and women. You don't see them getting behind, new fragrances. I think the only one that I see lately is Johnny Depp, and I couldn't even tell you what the fragrance was, but I see a commercial.
Well, I think he's working with Chanel right now. I think he's one of the ambassadors for Chanel. But it's interesting going back to what you said about the early days, why certain men's fragrances were so distinctive as well as women's. I think that they all, the perfumers decided that men should wear woodsy and deep masculine type fragrances. So what are the masculine type fragrances? Sandalwood, musk, amber, spice. And the woman's fragrances are usually florals with a little citrus and so on. So there were those sort of dichotomies. Now what's happening is that so many fragrances are being enjoyed by women and men women like sporty fragrances, and men, European men, really do like florals, whereas an American man doesn't want to go near flowers. But European men and Middle Eastern men and South American men are very happy because their cultures are so much older than ours, and they've been wearing perfumes, real perfumes, for centuries. And now it's really about dual audience. It's like gender-free fragrances, that there's no real distinction between a man's fragrance and a woman's fragrance. And so you have the woodsy and you have the spicy fragrances that really can be worn by men and women. So instead of saying, it's unisex, I like to say it's dual audience. It can be worn by both sexes.
So they won't have separate, you don't go up to the counter and say, where are the men's fragrances or where are the women's fragrances? You won't have that. You're probably not going to see it at all in the next, 5 to 10 years, I'm sure.
I think there's always going to be the marketing aspect of, fragrance. They call it perfumes for women and colognes for men. But what's interesting is now more and more men are saying, I want a perfume. So men are also crossing over to say, I want a perfume.
Yeah. Well, Sue, we've got to let our sponsors take a break here, and we'll be right back.
Sure.
Publishing marketing package for authors. $1,500 value, save 40% now. Includes a 6-piece marketing kit of 250 bookmarks, 250 business cards, 250 postcards, 1 table banner, 1 table runner, and 50 download cards, plus book cover design, ebook creation, PDF setups, upload to Ingram Spark, scroll placement, video commercial, and interview on IBS. Plus much more. Email bourgeoismedia@look.com for details or bourgeoismedia.com.
Hi, I'm Mel Greenberg, author of Running with Our Eyes Closed, book 1 in the Empty Nested series. To the world, Samantha has the perfect life. 3 wonderful children, a loving husband, so she thought, and a life split between Dallas and Italy. When her youngest leaves for college, it all comes crashing down, forcing Samantha to re-examine everything. Over 7 days in one of the most romantic countries in the world, Samantha faces the past she thought she'd overcome and begins to redefine her role as a woman, a wife, and a mother.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to care for a loved one? Well, during COVID, almost all of us have been doing just that. I'm Charlotte Canion, award-winning author, actress, and speaker. And my book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, shows you how you can revive, thrive, and survive with 4 golden rules. You have to love one another. You have to respect one another. You have to have patience with one another. And most of all, you've got to forgive one another. I'm Charlotte Canion, and I approve this message.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new indie authors. Find us on all major podcast systems and YouTube. Join B. Alan Bourgeois on today's show.
Okay, this is Charlotte Canion, your host, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with Sue Phillips. Now, Sue is not just an author, she's an entrepreneur, and she is a fragrance guru. I'm going to anoint her as the fragrance guru. It has been a pleasure talking to you and hearing about history of, of perfumes and fragrances. And I want to know more. So I would like to know where would people go? How do we find your website and get in touch with you if we want you to speak, at a group, or if they want to get your book?
I would love to. I love to speak about fragrance, and I love to do events and really help people understand the power of perfume. So I have 2 websites. One is Centerprises.com. That's enterprises with an SC in the beginning, Centerprises. And the other one is SuePhillips.com. Centerprises is really my website for my products, my perfumes, for corporate events and team building events, and for people who really want to take my scent quiz, and I will then look at their results and then create a fragrance for them. We have a phone. Sorry. And, yeah. So
Should we
They're not
start
giving it out. That's the trouble. I have a cell phone and I have a real phone. So scenterprises.com for people who really want to learn about fragrance. Perhaps you take my scent personality quiz and then we look at their answers or look at their answers and create a custom fragrance for them. SuePhillips.com is really about me, the author, the speaker. And I'm so excited to show you my book, The Power of Perfume, how to choose it, wear it, and enjoy it. And on the back, there's some lovely testimonials, one from the shark, the original shark, Kevin Harrington, and one actually from Dr. Robert Henkin, who's the head of the Smell and Taste Clinic. And I had met with him years ago when I was the beauty director for a magazine, and I interviewed him about the correlation of smell and taste. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot of lately is helping people who've lost their sense of smell because of COVID. And it's been remarkable how we've actually been able to help them rediscover and regain their sense of smell. I'm sort of liken it to when you lose your sense of smell, it's like the blinds come down and everything is dark. And then through smell therapy, I'm calling it scent healing, I'm able to help people. And even though I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, and I make no guarantees of success, there has been an amazing success rate of people really rediscovering, gaining their sense of smell. So they're calling me the scent whisperer or the scent healer.
That is super. Well, Sue, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for taking your time out to speak with us this evening. And I know everyone listening is just fascinated by your stories about perfume and the history of perfume. And I'm Charlotte. We want to thank you again. And I'm Charlotte Canion, your host. And I want you to remember, a rose is like a book. You can't know its beauty until you look at it. And a book is like a rose. You won't know its full beauty until you open it. This is Charlotte Canion saying bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Indie Beacon Show, produced by Beyond Bourgeois for the Authors Marketing International LLC. Copyright 2021. Voiceover by Beyond Bourgeois. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, please email us at authorsmarketing@outlook.com. If you would like to be on the show, please complete the form found on our website at indiebeacon.com. You may also watch previous year's shows on the website. Music is Frolic of Words, created for Indie Beacon